The call came in at 2:47 inches the afternoon on a Tuesday in February. I remember the exact time, because I had just glanced at the clock on my dashboard, thinking I could still make it to my 3:15 meeting at the office if the 401 wasn't backed up. It was backed up. It's always backed up. And then the car in front of me stopped without warning. And I didn't. The airbag hit me before I even understood what had happened. I sat there for a moment in the strange quiet that follows something loud. The hiss of the engine. The smell of something burning that turned out to be nothing serious. Just the airbag powder. My hands were still on the wheel. I took one breath. Then another. I wasn't unconscious. I wasn't screaming. But my left wrist felt wrong, in a way I couldn't describe. And there was a pressure behind my sternum that I knew. From 8 years, working as a registered nurse in a trauma unit, was not nothing. The other driver was already out of his car, asking if I was okay. I said yes, out of habit. Nurses do that. We say we're fine while we're quietly assessing ourselves, the same way we'd assess a patient. I called 911. Then I called my husband, Daniel. He picked up on the second ring. There's been an accident. I said, I'm okay. But I need you to come. I'm on the 401 westbound. Just past the Mississauga Road exit. He said he was leaving right then. I heard his chair push back before he even finished the sentence. While I waited for the paramedics, I called my mother. I don't know why I did that. A beat. Maybe. Or something older than habit, that reflex that lives in your chest from childhood. The one that says, call mom, when something goes wrong. Even when you are 31 years old. Even when you know, somewhere underneath that reflex, that calling mom has not actually made things better in a very long time. She answered on the fourth ring. Hi, sweetheart. I'm a little busy right now, Mom. I was in a car accident. I'm on the highway. The paramedics are coming. A pause. Then. Oh my God. Are you hurt? I think my wrist might be broken. And I'm having some chest pain. It's probably the airbag. But they need to check me out. Another pause. Longer this time. And then? In a different tone, the tone I had learned to brace for, she said, Oh, Claire. I can't right now. Your brother just called. He got a ticket on his way to work this morning, and he's absolutely beside himself. I stared through my cracked windshield at the gray February sky. A ticket. I said. He was doing 82 inches, a 60 zone. Which, honestly, I told him about that car. The fine is $295. And you know how he is. He gets himself so worked up. Mom. I'm on the side of the highway. I think my wrist is broken. You said the paramedics are coming. So you're in good hands. I'll call you later once I've calmed Ryan down. You know how he spirals. She hung up before I could say anything else. The paramedics arrived 4 minutes later. I remember sitting on the stretcher in the back of the ambulance and thinking, very clearly, my brother got a $295 speeding ticket. And my mother just chose that over me. I turned that thought over in my mind, the way you'd examine something you found on the ground. Not quite sure yet what it was. I was taken to Credit Valley Hospital. Broken left wrist. 2 bruised ribs. Mild concussion. Not life-threatening. Not nothing either. Daniel arrived at the hospital at 4:10. He walked into my curtain bay, in the emergency department with his coat, still half on, and his face the color of old snow. And when he saw me sitting up with my wrist in a temporary splint, he let out a long breath that sounded like it had been held since I called him. I called your parents, he said. Both of them. Your mom said she was dealing with something with Ryan. Your dad didn't pick up. I know, I said. He looked at me for a moment. Did she say she was coming? She did not. Daniel sat down in the plastic chair beside my bed and took my uninjured hand and didn't say anything for a while. Which is one of the things I love most about him. He knows when words are not the point. My mother called at 6:48 that evening. 2 hours after I had been admitted for overnight observation because of the concussion. She asked how I was doing, and I told her broken wrist. Bruised ribs. Observation overnight. Likely going home tomorrow. She said, "Oh good. I'm so relieved." She said Ryan had eventually calmed down, and that the two of them had gone for dinner at the Swiss chalet on Dundas. "We'll come visit you tomorrow," she said. "Don't bother," I said. And then I was surprised to find I meant it. This is the part of the story where I need to back up. Because what happened that February doesn't exist in isolation. It is one piece of a much longer pattern. And patterns are only visible once you have enough data points. By the time the accident happened, I had been collecting data points for approximately 8 years without fully admitting to myself what the data said. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I work as a registered nurse at a Level 1 trauma center in the Greater Toronto area. My brother Ryan is 28. He works part-time at a sporting goods store and has lived with my parents in the house we grew up in Brampton. Since he dropped out of college in his second year, I moved out at 18. I put myself through a 4-year nursing program, working evenings and weekends the entire time. I graduated. I got my first job. I got my own apartment. Paid my own bills. When I met Daniel at 25, my parents liked him immediately. Warm. Employed. Owns his own vehicle. What more do you want? And we married 2 years later. Ryan dropped out because, as my mother explained it, he just wasn't ready. Ryan didn't get a full-time job because the right opportunity hasn't come along yet. Ryan moved back home because it just makes sense right now. These explanations came and went for years, and I absorbed them without pushing back. Because in our family, you did not push back on things involving Ryan. Ryan was sensitive. Ryan was still figuring himself out. Ryan had always had a harder time than I did. And therefore Ryan required more. I started helping financially when I got my first real nursing job. Not a lot at first. I covered my parents' internet bill one month when money was tight. Then the hydro bill, the following month. Then a car repair for my father. I told myself it was temporary. I kept telling myself it was temporary, even as the temporary stretched across 3 years, and then 4. At my most recent calculation, I had contributed approximately $34,000 to my family of origin over 6 years. This number exists in a spreadsheet on my laptop that I made one night at 1 a.m. after Daniel gently asked me if I'd ever added it up. I had not added it up. Once I added it up, I understood why he'd asked. The $34,000 included $8,000 that went directly to Ryan. 2 months' rent when he briefly tried living on his own. A car insurance payment after he got a DUI at 24 and couldn't afford the increased premium. A new laptop for job applications. Money that moved in one direction and never came back. Which is the nature of money when you give it to someone who does not feel the need to return it. My parents did not ask Ryan to pay any of this back. My parents did not ask Ryan to do much of anything. What my parents did, reliably, was call me. Daniel knew about all of this. He had watched it for the 3 years we'd been married, and for 2 years before that. He had said, carefully, and without pressure, probably a dozen times, "You can stop. You know, You're allowed to stop. And I had always said I know. I know. And then the next time my mother called, I would say yes again. Because the alternative required a confrontation I wasn't ready to have. The accident made me ready. I was not in mortal danger in that hospital room. I want to be accurate about that. My injuries were real, but they were not life-threatening. And I was alert and coherent. And Daniel was there. And the medical staff were professional and competent. And everything was handled exactly as it should be. I signed my own consent forms. I did not need my parents for that legally. Daniel was my next of kin. And even if he hadn't been, I was a conscious adult in full possession of my faculties. My mother's absence was not a medical emergency. It was something else. It was information. I lay in that hospital bed with my splinted wrist resting on a pillow, watching the monitors, listening to the sounds of a ward I knew from the other side of the curtain. And I let myself receive that information without deflecting it for the first time. My mother chose to have dinner at Swiss Chalet rather than come to the hospital, where her daughter was being held overnight for a concussion. She made that choice because her son was upset about a speeding ticket. Not a crisis. Not a medical emergency. A speeding ticket. 295美元. Which, as a point of comparison, represents less than 1% of the money I had given this family since I started working. I did not cry that night. I thought I would. But I didn't. I just lay there and thought clearly for a long time. Daniel drove me home the next afternoon. My parents did not come to visit. Though my mother sent a voice message saying she hoped I was feeling better. Ryan texted a single thumbs-up emoji, which I did not respond to. I went back to work 3 weeks later, with my wrist in a proper cast, which my colleagues signed with marker in the break room. It was the most attended to I had felt in months. Over the next several weeks, something shifted in me that I can only describe as a settling. Like something that had been held at an angle for a long time, was finally allowed to rest flat. I stopped responding to my mother's calls within the first ring. I let them go to voicemail sometimes. I stopped automatically saying yes to the financial requests that came periodically. Dressed up in various ways. Dad's car needs new brakes. Ryan's hours got cut this month. The furnace was making a noise, and the repair was more than they expected. I said I couldn't help right now. I said Daniel and I were saving for something. Both of these things were true. I did not elaborate. My mother's calls became more frequent. This is a pattern I've read about. The escalation that happens when a dynamic you have participated in for years begins to change. She wanted to know if something was wrong. She wanted to know if I was upset with her. She wanted to know, and this one arrived about 6 weeks after the accident. In a long voicemail, I listened to 3 times whether I was being influenced by Daniel to pull away from my family. Daniel, for his part, laughed when I played him that voicemail. Not a cruel laugh, a tired one. She's not wrong that I think you should pull away, he said. She's just wrong about the influence part. In April, my hospital's foundation held its annual gala. I want to be clear that this is not a glamorous event in the way the word gala might suggest. It's held in the hospital's conference center. There are folding chairs and rubber chicken. And the dress code is business formal, but half the attendees show up in their nicest scrubs. It is, however, a fundraiser. And it is attended by donors, hospital leadership, board members, and staff. Which means it is the kind of room where things said out loud carry some weight. I had been nominated for a staff recognition award, which I found out about in February, and which had, due to the accident and everything that followed, receded somewhat in my mind. My nurse manager reminded me the week before the gala. I told her I'd be there. I invited my parents. In the way I have every year, I've received a professional recognition. Out of a bit. Out of that same reflex. They said they would come. I told Daniel they had said yes, and he raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Okay." With the particular intonation that meant I'll believe it when I see it. I said I know. He said he was proud of me regardless. I told him I knew that too. The night of the gala. My parents did not come. My mother texted at 6:45. 15 minutes before the start time. To say that Ryan had had a really rough day, and she didn't feel comfortable leaving him. She sent a crying emoji. She said she was so sorry, and so proud of me. I read the text standing in the foyer of the conference center, in a burgundy dress I had bought specifically for this evening. With Daniel's hand at the small of my back. I showed him the screen. He read it, and then looked at me, and said nothing. "It's okay." I said. "Is it?" I thought about that for a moment. "No." I said. "But tonight is still mine." I put my phone in my clutch, and I walked into that room, and I sat with my colleagues, and I ate the rubber chicken, and when my name was called, I walked to the podium in the burgundy dress, and I accepted the award, and I gave a brief speech, thanking my team, and my manager, and the patients who taught me every day. And I looked out at that room full of people who showed up. And I said, I also want to say something a little unexpected. And I hope you'll bear with me. This past February, I was in a car accident. I had a broken wrist, bruised ribs, a concussion, and I spent the night in this hospital, on the other side of the curtain, for the first time. My husband was there within an hour. My parents were not, because my brother had received a speeding ticket that morning and was having a hard time coping with it. Tonight, my parents were invited to this room. And they are not here, for similar reasons. The room was very quiet. I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone. I'm telling you this because I spent 6 years making excuses for a pattern I didn't want to name. And I've learned recently that naming things clearly is the beginning of everything. The people in this room showed up. The people in this room always show up. That means more to me than I can say. I stepped away from the podium. The applause started slow, and then wasn't slow anymore. My father called at 1017 that night. I was in the car with Daniel. Heating. Running. Because it was still cold. His hand resting on the gear shift. I let it go to voicemail. My mother called at 1022. Then again at 1035. Then a text that said, I cannot believe you would do this to your family in public like this. We need to talk. Then another text from Ryan that said that was messed up, Claire. I turned my phone face down on my thigh and looked out the window at the lights of the highway. The same highway, where the accident had happened 2 months ago. Different stretch. Same road. You okay? Daniel asked. Yeah. I said. And for the first time in a long time when I said it, I meant it. I called my mother back the following morning. When I was ready, and not before, I told her I was going to say some things, and I needed her to let me finish before she responded. She was quiet in a way that felt like agreement. Or possibly shock. I told her about the spreadsheet. I told her the number. I told her I did not regret helping my parents when they genuinely needed it. And that I did not resent contributing to the family I came from. What I resented, I said, was the consistency with which Ryan's minor inconveniences outranked my actual emergencies. I told her that the accident in February had not changed who I was to this family. The accident had simply made visible what was already true. My mother started to cry somewhere around the third sentence. I waited. When I finished, she said, I didn't know you felt that way. I know. I said, that's part of the problem. We talked for almost 40 minutes. It was not the kind of conversation where everything gets resolved. Those conversations don't exist in real life. Not in 40 minutes. Not in a single phone call. But it was honest in a way that our conversations had not been in years. Maybe ever. And honesty is somewhere to start. I told her I was pausing any financial support for the time being. Pausing. Not ending. I was careful about that word. She did not push back the way I had expected. She sounded tired. She sounded, possibly, like someone who had also known something was wrong for a long time and had been waiting for someone else to say it first. My father called separately 2 days later. His call was shorter. He is a man of few words, at the best of times, and this was not the best of times. But what he said was this: I should have come to the hospital. I know that. I'm sorry. 5 sentences. I told him I appreciated that. We talked about the Leafs for a few minutes. Which is how my father communicates that a conversation is over, but not bad. I can work with that. Ryan has not called. I have not called Ryan. This is, I think, in the honest shape of that relationship. For now, what I know is this: I am 31 years old. I have a job I worked hard for. In a building full of people who show up. I have a husband who left a meeting and drove across the city in February traffic because I called and said I needed him. I have bruised ribs that have healed and a wrist that aches when the weather changes. Which Daniel says is the most Canadian possible souvenir from a car accident. I have a spreadsheet I no longer need to add to. Last week, my mother called to tell me that Ryan got a full-time job. Something in logistics. She said. With benefits. She sounded surprised and proud at the same time. In roughly equal measure, I told her that was genuinely great news. And I meant it. Then she asked if Daniel and I wanted to come for dinner Sunday. And she said she'd make the lemon chicken I grew up eating. And I said yes. And I wrote it in my calendar. I don't know what Sunday dinner will look like now. I don't know if things will be different, or if old habits will reassert themselves the way they tend to. What I know is that I will go with my eyes open this time. Which is the only way I know how to go anywhere anymore. My wrist still aches when it rains. I've decided I'm okay with that.